Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Wanted to discuss a topic in a careful way. I don't want to get into a discussion about the legitimacy of the death penalty, the legitimacy of capital punishment. We can talk about that at a later date. That is not the purpose of this podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to talk about the execution of a man who had been on death row for 30 years, a man named Kenneth Smith. He was executed by nitrogen gas with the permission of the Supreme Court. It is the first time that a new method of execution was attempted since the early 1980s. And I don't know what you can call it except a complete and utter violation of justice. Cruel and inhuman punishment taken to the extreme. It took 22 minutes for this man to die. He was literally tortured for 22 minutes until he finally died with a mask over his face. He suffocated to death with a mask over his face. His family was there. They witnessed the execution. They stood by and they watched this man suffer. Now, it's hard to have sympathy for the actual man. He was paid to kill a woman. That's why he was on death row. He was paid to kill a woman. Anybody who does that, at least to me, does not really deserve the label human being. As you know, I have said before that I equate human being with humanity. And by humanity, I don't mean mankind. I mean, a human being is somebody with humanity, with caring, who behaves like a human being. And clearly this man, as a killer for hire, did not behave like a human being. So we can get that out of the way. There is no reason to be sympathetic to the guy for what he did. No reason. Again, without discussing the issue of capital punishment itself, torturing somebody for 22 minutes in Alabama to kill them with the permission of the Supreme Court is by definition cruel and unusual punishment. You simply don't do that. Now, if we want to kill somebody, execute somebody, there are ways of doing it which do not have that same kind of horrific result. For example, a firing squad, a guillotine, a single bullet shot between the eyes. Those are all painless or relatively painless methods of execution. But instead, we choose to suffocate a man with nitrogen gas and watch him die over the course of 22 minutes. Who are we? What are we? As a society, I would argue that the United States is no longer human. Homo sapien? Yeah. We are populated by Homo sapiens or Homo sapiens sapiens. And there are certainly a few humans here and there. I'm not saying that everyone in the United States is inhuman. For example, with all due humility, I would say that I am human. The fact that I am making this podcast, which to me is a kind of conscientization, indicates that I have humanity, at least some humanity. But trying an unused method of execution when there are so many methods out there which we know are painless, I just don't know how any word could be used for that other than inexcusable. We can't do that. We simply can't do that. In the Western world, the first world, as bad as it is, there are relatively few countries which still use capital punishment. The US is among them. We are in that tiny club. We still use capital punishment. We know how to kill people painlessly. We know how to do it. The fact that we know it and don't use it is, again, inexcusable. Now, why don't we use this simple method of, say, shooting a person between the eyes? My speculation is, obviously, I'm not involved in any of the decision-making processes involved in this, is that the reason why is because we don't like how it looks. It's messy. It's really, really messy to shoot someone between their eyes. So we don't use it. Lethal injections used to be possible, but they were manufactured by a company in Europe, and that company has stopped manufacturing it. The EU, the European Union, forbids capital punishment. So no European country that belongs to the EU practices capital punishment. And there are many countries in Europe that are not a part of the EU, like Britain, for example, that do not practice capital punishment. But here we are. This supposedly exceptionalist nation of the United States, but exceptionalist for all the wrong reasons. We use capital punishment to torture people. To torture people. Personally, I don't care how capital punishment looks. If we're going to kill people, it should look as bad as it is. Because killing somebody is pretty painful. Without getting into the particulars of supporting or not supporting capital punishment, killing somebody is always painful. It's always painful. And I'm not talking about for the victim. I'm talking about for the observers, for the families. It's always painful. So it should be our job to find the most compassionate means of killing somebody that we can. Doesn't matter who the person is. Doesn't matter what crime the person committed, however horrendous. Any murder is horrendous. You don't go around murdering people. I think most people would accept that. So there is a middle ground between not excusing acts of murder, meaning capital offenses, and killing somebody through torture. There has to be a middle ground. Not only does there have to be one, there are many. And yet, for some reason, perhaps because that lethal injection is no longer available, I don't know, we don't do it compassionately. Whenever you kill somebody, however evil that person was, their execution should always be performed with compassion. But that's not the world we live in. I think there is a reason why the US is the leader of the empire, the leader of the first world. The other countries in the first world, in the empire, may not perform capital punishment, but the leader does. We do. And we have a lot of people, mostly, but not exclusively, Republicans, who support the idea of capital punishment. Fine. Again, I'm not going to debate that issue right now. But why can't we do it in a way that is not going to put the person through a 22-minute excruciatingly painful death? And that is precisely what we just did in Alabama. Recently, we have a history of botched executions. This is only the latest one. I assume that more will follow, because we don't really seem to care. How much attention has the media given to this 22-minute botched execution? Not much. Not much. Hardly any. And why? I don't know. Maybe because it makes us feel bad. Well, killing somebody should make one feel bad. Even if you think it is justified, it should still feel bad to kill a human being. And yet it seems as though for a large portion of the US population, it does not seem bad at all. So, when I look at the First World, when I look at the empire headed by the United States, my feelings about wanting to see the empire end are only reinforced. I mean, how can one think any other way? How can any compassionate human being look at the state of the empire? Look at that botched execution in Alabama. Look at the way the Israelis are massacring Gazans and not want an end to the empire. So I don't know about you. We are all individuals. We all have different priorities. We all think in different ways. That's fine. There's no way to change that. It's called individuality. We all have our own preferences, our own priorities, our own values. But certainly, I think one value which should be universal is not torturing another human being. For now, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.